You know that feeling when you pour your entire soul into understanding someone and they give you surface level small talk back? When you offer them the depths of who you are and they hand you a participation trophy? If you're an INFJ, you've been playing this rigged game your entire life, giving 100% of your emotional depth and receiving maybe 20% back. But here's what most people don't understand about INFJs. There comes a moment when something inside them just clicks off. Not breaks, clicks off. Like a switch being flipped from warm to ice cold. And when that happens, everything changes about how they operate in the world. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand the cold-blooded shift that transforms an INFJ from someone who desperately seeks connection into someone who commands respect without even trying. We're talking about the death of the idealist and the birth of the strategist. Before we start, please hit the like button, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss any of our weekly deep dives into the world of personality types. And if you're looking for a deeper understanding of yourself and your INFJ personality, browse our favorite INFJ products in the description and click the link in the comments to take our favorite free personality test. The death of the idealist. Let's start with the psychological mechanism that keeps INFJs trapped in this exhausting cycle. As dominant NI users, INFJs have this unconscious expectation that other people will mirror their level of insight and emotional intelligence. They assume that because they can see patterns and read between the lines, everyone else can too. This creates what I call the empathy trap. The INFJ gives their full emotional bandwidth to relationships because they genuinely believe that's how connection works. They think that if I show up authentically and vulnerably, the other person will naturally do the same. But here's the brutal truth. Most people aren't operating at that level of emotional awareness. So the INFJ keeps waiting for that soulmate connection, that person who can meet them in their internal world and understand the complexity of how they see everything. They're searching for someone who can validate their depth because they've been conditioned to believe their worth comes from being understood by others. But then comes the painful realization. That deep connection they're craving is actually an internal projection. They're not finding their other half. They're seeing someone who triggers their own capacity for depth. The magic they feel isn't about the other person. It's about their own ability to create meaning and connection. This is where dominant NI does something fascinating. Instead of continuing to focus outward on predicting and meeting other people's needs, it starts turning inward. The INFJ begins to recognize that their internal world is complete in itself. They don't need external validation to confirm what they already know about themselves. This is when the famous INFJ door slam happens, but not for the reasons people think. It's not an emotional reaction or punishment. It's a strategic decision. The INFJ realizes they've been giving their most precious resource, their emotional energy, to people who can't reciprocate in kind. So they slam the door, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. They're protecting their internal world from people who would drain it without offering anything substantial in return. This isn't cruelty, it's wisdom. The moment this shift happens, the INFJ stops being a healer and becomes a strategist. Instead of trying to fix everyone around them, they start asking different questions. What serves my growth? What aligns with my vision? What deserves my energy? They realize that their need to be understood was actually a form of seeking external validation. And external validation is just another way of giving your power away to other people. When they stop seeking it, they stop being dependent on others for their sense of worth. This is the death of the idealist. The version of the INFJ who believed that if they just loved hard enough, gave enough, understood enough, they would eventually find someone who could meet them at their level. That version dies because it was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how human connection actually works. What emerges is something much more powerful. an INFJ who understands that their depth is not a burden that needs to be carried by someone else. It's a superpower that makes them magnetic when they stop apologizing for it. The 4 strategic consequences. Now let's talk about what actually happens when an INFJ makes this shift. Because the transformation isn't just internal. It creates 4 strategic consequences that completely change how they show up in the world. First, you get the rise of what I call the Sigma INFJ. This is an INFJ who has become completely self-contained. Their sense of value no longer depends on whether others understand, appreciate, or even like them. They've built an internal fortress of self-worth that external opinions can't shake. This Sigma INFJ operates from a place of quiet confidence. They're not trying to prove anything to anyone because they've already proven it to themselves. They observe social dynamics without getting emotionally invested in the outcomes. They can walk into any room and immediately assess the energy, the power structures, the unspoken tensions, without feeling the need to fix or manage any of it. People find this incredibly magnetic because most humans are constantly seeking validation from others. When you encounter someone who genuinely doesn't need your approval, it creates a sense of mystery and intrigue. The Sigma INFJ becomes attractive not because they're trying to be, but because they've stopped trying altogether. Second consequence, unbreakable boundaries. When an INFJ stops expecting others to meet their emotional depth, they also stop making excuses for people who consistently disrespect their boundaries. They create what I call a value fortress around themselves. This fortress isn't built from anger or resentment. It's built from clarity. The INFJ now understands precisely what they will and won't tolerate. They enforce these boundaries ruthlessly, not because they want to hurt people, but because they refuse to hurt themselves by accepting less than they deserve. What confuses the outside world is how effortless this enforcement becomes. The INFJ doesn't argue, explain, or justify their boundaries. They simply remove themselves from situations that don't align with their standards. People who are used to negotiating with the old version of the INFJ suddenly find themselves talking to a wall. This creates a fascinating dynamic in which people automatically respect the INFJ's boundaries because they realize there's no room for negotiation. The boundary enforcement becomes so consistent that it trains everyone around them to operate at a higher standard. Third strategic consequence, the logic over emotion default. When an INFJ stops feeling emotionally responsible for everyone around them, something incredible happens. Their decision-making becomes ice-cold, logical. Remember, INFJs have tertiary TI, which means they have access to incredible analytical thinking when they're not overwhelmed by emotional processing. Once they stop absorbing everyone else's emotional chaos, their natural strategic thinking comes online, full force. This version of the INFJ makes decisions based purely on what serves their long-term vision. They can cut ties with people who drain them without feeling guilty. They can pursue opportunities that align with their goals without worrying about who they might disappoint. They become ruthlessly efficient at eliminating anything that doesn't contribute to their growth. People who knew the old version of the INFJ find this transformation shocking. Where's the person who used to bend over backwards to make everyone comfortable? Where's the endless empathy and emotional availability? It's still there, but now it's reserved for people and situations that actually deserve it. Fourth and final consequence, magnetic silence. When an INFJ stops needing to be understood, they also stop over-explaining themselves. They become comfortable with being misunderstood because they know their worth isn't determined by other people's comprehension. This creates an aura of quiet confidence that people find irresistible. The INFJ, who used to desperately try to help everyone understand their perspective, now speaks less, but says more. When they do share their insights, people listen because they know it's rare and valuable. This magnetic silence makes them incredibly attractive in both personal and professional settings. People start seeking them out for their wisdom and perspective. The very thing they used to desperately offer for free now becomes something people actively pursue. What's fascinating is that each of these consequences builds on the others. The The Sigma mindset enables unbreakable boundaries. Unbreakable boundaries allow for logic over emotion decision-making. And all of this together creates the magnetic silence that draws people in. The outside world doesn't understand what happened. They see an INFJ who used to be warm and accommodating suddenly become selective and strategic. They interpret this as the INFJ becoming cold or arrogant, but that's not what's happening at all. The power of wholeness. What's really happening is the INFJ is becoming whole. This shift isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming complete. When you stop looking for external validation, you start validating yourself. When you stop seeking connection, you start connecting with your own depth. This is actually the most loving thing an INFJ can do, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. Because when you're operating from wholeness instead of neediness, you can offer genuine value to others without expecting anything in return. Think about it this way. The old version of the INFJ was like someone trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much love, understanding, or connection they received, it was never enough, because they were looking for something external to fill an internal void. The transformed INFJ has plugged that hole. They've realized that the depth they were seeking in others already exists within themselves. They don't need someone else to validate their complexity because they've learned to appreciate it themselves. This creates a beautiful paradox. The less they need connection, the more meaningful their connections become. Because now they're choosing relationships from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. They're not asking, what can this person do for me? They're asking, what can we create together? Here's your challenge. Identify one area of your life where you're still seeking external validation. Maybe it's waiting for someone to appreciate your insights. Maybe it's hoping someone will finally understand your emotional depth. Maybe it's looking for recognition for all the ways you help others. For the next 7 days, consciously redirect that energy inward. Instead of seeking understanding from others, work on understanding yourself more deeply. Instead of waiting for appreciation, appreciate your own growth and insights. The shift from seeking connection to commanding respect isn't about becoming heartless, it's about becoming whole. When an INFJ stops needing anyone, they become magnetic to everyone. Subscribe for more strategic insights that help you understand the true power of the INFJ mind. If you want to continue the journey to understanding yourself or an INFJ in your life, click either of the following videos, where we continue to unlock the secrets of the INFJ personality type.